The excavation site on Xerion Prime looked like a graveyard of ancient dreams. Red dust swirled across the barren landscape, carrying whispers of a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. The Galactic Archaeological Consortium had been digging here for 3 months, uncovering artifacts that made no sense and defied every known law of physics. Dr. Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her forehead as she watched the latest discovery emerge from the dig site. The excavation robots moved with mechanical precision, their metal arms carefully brushing away centuries of accumulated dust from what appeared to be a suit of armor. But this was unlike any armor Elena had ever seen in her 15 years as a xenoarchaeologist. The armor was completely black, so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing with a faint red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The suit stood upright in the excavation pit as if waiting for someone to claim it. Even from 50 meters away, Elena could feel something radiating from the artifact, something that made her skin crawl and her stomach twist with unease. "By the 7 moons of Zephyr," whispered Dr. Klix, the lead Zephyrian researcher. His blue-scaled face had turned pale and his usually steady hands were shaking. "What is that thing?" "Unknown artifact designation XP7, replied Dr. Nine Crystals Dancing, the expedition's crystalline mind expert. Her translucent body flickered with nervous energy. Preliminary scans suggest it's composed of an unknown metallic compound. The symbols appear to be some form of written language, but they don't match any known galactic scripts. Elena stepped closer to the pit's edge, drawn by scientific curiosity despite the growing sense of dread. "Have we tried the universal translators?" 3 different models, said Professor Grok, the expedition's granite folk leader. His rocky features showed more emotion than Elena had seen in months. All of them overloaded within seconds. Something about those symbols breaks every translation matrix we have. As the excavation robots finished their work, the full majesty and terror of the armor became clear. It was designed for a humanoid figure, roughly 7 feet tall. The helmet was shaped like a skull, with empty eye sockets that seemed to stare directly at whoever looked at them. The chest piece bore the largest concentration of glowing symbols, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "We need to bring it up for proper analysis," Dr. Klix said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Standard containment protocols." Elena nodded, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. As the robots began lifting the armor from its ancient resting place, the red glow of the symbols intensified. The pulsing rhythm grew faster, more urgent. The first sign of trouble came when Dr. Klix suddenly screamed. The Zephyrian researcher dropped to his knees, clutching his head with both hands. His scream was unlike anything Elena had ever heard, pure primal terror mixed with unbearable anguish. It was the sound of someone whose mind was breaking apart. "Klix!" Elena rushed toward him, but Professor Grok grabbed her arm with one massive stone hand. "Stay back," the granite folk warned. "Something's happening to Nine Crystals too." Elena turned to see the crystalline mind researcher flickering rapidly between different states of matter. Her usual calm, ordered thought patterns were visible, as chaotic light bursts throughout her translucent body. She was making sounds that no crystalline mind should be able to make, sounds of pain and fear. "Get them away from the artifact," Elena shouted to the medical team. But as the robots finally pulled the armor completely free from the ground, the situation got much worse. Every alien on the dig site began screaming at once. The Zephyrians collapsed in writhing heaps, their blue scales turning gray with terror. The crystalline minds shattered into fragments of confused light, their consciousness scattered. Even the supposedly emotionless granite folk were backing away, their stone faces cracking with expressions of absolute horror. Elena stood in the middle of the chaos, watching her colleagues suffer. The armor now hung suspended in the excavation beam, and she could feel its presence like a physical weight pressing down on her mind. There was something deeply wrong with this artifact, something that affected every alien species present. But strangely, Elena felt no urge to scream or run. The presence was unpleasant, like standing next to an open grave, but it didn't drive her to madness like it had the others. "Emergency protocols," she called into her communicator. "All non-essential personnel evacuate immediately. Medical teams, priority on Dr. Klix and Nine Crystals Dancing." The next several hours were a nightmare of medical emergencies and panicked evacuations. Dr. Klix was transferred, to a psychiatric facility on the nearest space station, mumbling about endless darkness and the weight of worlds. 9 crystals dancing had to be carefully reassembled by specialists, her fragmented consciousness requiring days of delicate work. 17 researchers in total were hospitalized. Every single one was an alien. Elena was the only human on the expedition, and the only one unaffected. The armor was quickly sealed in a containment unit and transported to the expedition's main research facility. Even sealed behind energy barriers and thick metal walls, it continued to affect any alien who came too close. The few brave volunteers who tried to study it lasted only minutes before requiring medical attention. Elena stood in the observation deck, looking down at the containment chamber through reinforced windows. The armor sat in the center of the sterile room, still glowing with that ominous red light. The symbols seemed to writhe and shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. "It doesn't make sense," said Dr. Vorth, the expedition's backup xenobiologist. The tall, thin ethereal had arrived that morning to replace one of the hospitalized researchers. "We've tested it for radiation, biological agents, psychic emanations, dimensional distortions. Nothing explains why it affects every known sentient species except humans," Elena finished. "I know." "The consortium is demanding answers," Dr. Vorth continued. 17 researchers in psychiatric care, millions of credits in damaged equipment, and an artifact that might be the most dangerous object ever discovered. "They want to know why you're immune." Elena pressed her hand against the observation window. Far below, the armor's glow seemed to pulse in response, though that was probably her imagination. "I don't know why," she said honestly. "I felt something when I looked at it, but nothing like what happened to the others. It was more like sadness. Deep, ancient sadness. Sadness doesn't drive people insane," Dr. Vorth pointed out. "Maybe it does, if there's enough of it." Elena had been thinking about this for days. Every species in the galaxy had evolved differently, developed different ways of processing emotion and trauma. Maybe whatever was trapped in that armor was something only humans could understand. "I want to go in there," she said suddenly. Dr. Vorth's ethereal form flickered with alarm. "Absolutely not. The consortium has classified this as a Class 7 hazard. No sentient being is allowed within 50 meters. "But I'm not affected," Elena insisted. "I might be the only one who can figure out what this thing actually is. Or you might be the next one screaming in a psychiatric ward." Elena stared down at the armor. In the depths of those empty eye sockets, she thought she saw something familiar, not malevolence or evil, but something far more human. Pain. Loss. The kind of grief that came from bearing an impossible burden. "We need to understand it," she said quietly. "Whatever this thing is, whatever happened to the civilization that made it, it's important. Important enough that they left it behind for someone to find." Dr. Vorth was already shaking his ethereal head. "The answer is no, Dr. Vasquez, final decision." But Elena wasn't listening anymore. She was thinking about the screams of her colleagues, the way they'd looked at the armor with such terror. They'd seen something in those glowing symbols that drove them mad. She wondered what they'd seen. More importantly, she wondered what she might see that they couldn't. Deep in the containment chamber, the armor's glow pulsed once more, as if waiting. Elena waited until the night shift before making her move. The research facility was mostly empty, with only a skeleton crew monitoring the various alien artifacts they'd discovered on Zerion Prime. The containment chamber holding the armor was sealed with multiple security systems, but Elena had helped design those systems. She knew their weaknesses. The corridors were dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to reach toward her as she made her way to the restricted section. Her heart pounded, but not from fear of the armor itself. She was afraid of what the consortium would do if they caught her. They'd already threatened to remove her from the expedition entirely. But Elena couldn't stop thinking about the artifact. For 3 days, she'd watched her colleagues suffer from nightmares and psychological breakdowns, all because they'd been near the armor for a few minutes. Meanwhile, she felt nothing but a strange pull toward it, as if it was calling to her specifically. The containment chamber's outer door required her personal access code and biometric scan. Elena hesitated for only a moment before entering her credentials. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the inner chamber beyond. The armor sat exactly where they'd left it, glowing softly in the sterile white room. The red symbols pulsed with that familiar heartbeat rhythm, faster now that Elena was closer. She could feel something radiating from it. Not the terror that had affected the aliens, but something else. Something that made her chest tight with emotion she couldn't name. Elena put on the required protective suit and stepped through the inner airlock. The moment she entered the chamber, the armor's glow intensified dramatically. The symbols began shifting and changing, rearranging themselves into new patterns that hurt to look at directly. And then Elena heard it. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like a voice speaking directly inside her mind. But unlike the screaming madness that had affected her colleagues, this voice was quiet, tired, infinitely sad. So long, the voice whispered. So very long since anyone could hear us. Elena took a step closer, her scientific training warring with an overwhelming urge to comfort whatever was speaking to her. Who are you? We were guardians once, protectors of all who lived in the light. We stood watch against the darkness between stars, held the line when all hope was lost. Images flashed through Elena's mind, not her own memories, but something older. She saw vast space battles fought against creatures that seemed to be made of living shadow. She saw worlds burning as entities of pure chaos devoured everything in their path. And she saw warriors in armor just like this one, fighting impossible odds to buy time for others to escape. But the price was too high, the voice continued. To fight monsters, we had to become something more than mortal. We bound our souls to our armor, our duty to our very essence. We won the war, but we could never rest, never die, never find peace. Elena reached out her hand, stopping just short of touching the armor's chest plate. This close, she could see that the symbols weren't random markings, they were names. Thousands upon thousands of names, each one glowing with its own inner light. You're all in there, she whispered. An entire species trapped in their duty. The weight of it broke us, the voice said. One by one we fell to madness, the burden of eternal vigilance, the memory of all we had lost, the knowledge that our sacrifice might not be enough. Most of our kind chose to end their existence rather than continue. But some of us remained, waiting. Waiting for what? For someone who could understand, someone who would not flee from our pain but embrace it. Your people, human. You are the first we have encountered who do not break when faced with our grief. Elena finally understood why the armor had driven her alien colleagues insane. Every other species in the galaxy had evolved to avoid pain, to flee from suffering when possible. But humans were different. They were drawn to stories of sacrifice inspired by those who bore burdens for others. Where aliens saw madness in the armor's eternal duty, Elena saw nobility. Slowly, carefully, she placed her palm against the armor's chest plate. The moment her skin made contact with the metal, everything changed. The red glow that had pulsed through the symbols immediately shifted to brilliant white. Elena felt a surge of, not quite emotion, but something deeper. Recognition, acceptance, relief so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Yes, the voice said. And now Elena could hear multiple voices. A chorus of the dead speaking as one. You understand. You see what we truly are. Elena's mind was flooded with memories that weren't hers. She experienced the final days of a civilization that had called themselves the Valdari. She felt their determination as they made the choice to bind their souls to their weapons and armor. She understood the cosmic threat they had faced. Entities from the spaces between realities that sought to devour all organized matter and energy. The Valdari had won their war, but at a cost beyond imagining. They had become living weapons, their consciousness trapped in metal and crystal, unable to rest even in death. The weight of that existence, the constant vigilance required, had slowly driven most of them mad. But Elena didn't feel horror at their fate. Instead, she felt something she'd never experienced before. A deep, abiding respect for beings who had willingly damned themselves to save others. The others who came before you, the Valdari voices explained. They felt our anguish and could not bear it. To them, our existence is a tragedy too terrible to contemplate. But you see the purpose behind our pain. Because sometimes someone has to carry the burden, Elena said, her own voice thick with emotion. Someone has to stand guard while others sleep safely. Yes. And now the darkness stirs again. We can feel it in the deep places between stars. The entities we fought are returning, and there are so few of us left. Most of our armor lies empty now, its guardians having chosen oblivion over endless duty. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the containment chamber's temperature. You're saying the threat is coming back? It never truly left. We merely delayed it, bought time for the galaxy to grow and flourish. But now that time is ending. The armor's glow pulsed brighter, and Elena felt something pass between them. Not just information, but understanding. A connection that went beyond mere communication. You could bear it, the voices said. You and your people. Where others flee from sacrifice, you embrace it. Where others break under the weight of duty, you grow stronger. What are you asking of me? Nothing yet. But soon the choice will come. When the darkness returns, when the galaxy faces extinction once again, will humanity take up the burden that broke us? Will you become what we became, knowing the price? Elena looked down at her hand, still pressed against the armor's chest plate. The metal felt warm now, almost alive. She could sense the thousands of consciousnesses trapped within, each one waiting for an answer to a question that hadn't been asked yet. I don't know, she said honestly. That's not a choice I can make for my entire species. We know, but you can prepare them, help them understand what may be required. The connection between Elena and the armor began to fade, but not before one final image flashed through her mind. She saw the galaxy as the Valdari had seen it in their final days, a vast network of life and light, surrounded by an even vaster darkness filled with hungry things that wanted to devour it all. Find the others, the voices whispered as the glow dimmed back to its original red. Find our brothers and sisters who still wait in their armor. They sleep now, but your touch can wake them. When the time comes, you will need them all. Elena stepped back, her hand falling to her side. The armor looked exactly as it had before, but now she knew what lay beneath its surface. Not evil or madness, but the accumulated grief of an entire species that had chosen duty over death. Behind her, the containment chamber's alarms began blaring. Dr. Vorth and a team of security personnel were rushing toward the chamber, having detected the energy surge when Elena made contact with the armor. But Elena wasn't afraid anymore. She had work to do. Somewhere in the galaxy, other pieces of Valdari armor were waiting, and beyond the edge of known space, ancient enemies were stirring. Humanity would need to be ready for both. Elena's unauthorized contact with the armor created chaos throughout the Galactic Archaeological Consortium. Within hours of the incident, teams of investigators arrived from 17 different worlds, all demanding explanations for how a human had survived direct contact with what they were calling the most dangerous artifact in recorded history. But Elena barely noticed the political storm swirling around her. The connection she'd made with the Valdari armor had changed something fundamental in her mind. She could feel other artifacts scattered across the galaxy, calling out like distant stars in her consciousness. Each one contained the essence of fallen Valdari warriors, waiting for someone who could understand their sacrifice. Dr. Vorth found her in the expedition's database center 3 days after the incident, surrounded by holographic displays showing archaeological sites from across known space. The consortium is threatening to court-martial you, he said without preamble. They want to know exactly what happened in that chamber. Elena didn't look up from her work. Tell them I made first contact with a species that saved the galaxy millions of years ago, and now they're trying to warn us about something that's coming back. Elena, be serious. 17 researchers are still in psychiatric care because of that thing. The energy readings when you touched it were off the charts. Some of the investigators think it might have infected you with some kind of alien consciousness. That made Elena pause. She turned to face Dr. Vorth, noting the genuine concern in his ethereal features. Do I seem infected to you? You seem different, driven. You've been working nonstop since the incident, pulling up files on artifacts that have been gathering dust in storage facilities for decades. Elena gestured to the holographic displays around her. Because I know what they are now. Look at this. The meditation gauntlets of Kepler-7. The archaeological team that found them reported that anyone who tried to wear them experienced overwhelming sensations of duty and purpose. They've been locked away for 30 years because no one could figure out what they were for. She moved to another display. Or this, the crystal sword of Vega Prime. Every alien who touched it reported hearing voices speaking about the Eternal Watch. The Rigelian Empire classified it as a Class 6 psychic hazard. Elena, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that the Valdari left their weapons and armor all over the galaxy. Hundreds of pieces, maybe thousands. Every one of them contains the consciousness of warriors who died fighting something that wants to devour all life in the universe. Dr. Vorth's form flickered nervously. The voices you heard, they could have been hallucinations. Psychic feedback from an alien artifact. There's no proof that... Elena cut him off by activating another holographic display. This one showed a timeline stretching back millions of years, marked with dozens of archaeological discoveries. Look at the pattern. Every major civilization in galactic history has legends about the Dark Time, a period when something terrible threatened all life. The Zephyrians call it the Age of Screaming Stars. The crystalline minds refer to it as the Chaos Unbinding. Even your people have stories about the Void Hunger. Ancient myths, all describing the same thing. Entities from outside normal space-time that consume organized matter and energy. The Valdari called them the Void Devourers. Elena pulled up another file, this one showing energy readings from the armor. And look at this. The psychic emanations from the artifact aren't random. They're warnings. Detailed tactical information about how to fight beings that exist partially outside our dimension. Dr. Vorth studied the data, his scientific training warring with his instinctive fear of the armor. Even if this is true, what does it matter? These Void Devourers were defeated millions of years ago. Were they? Or were they just delayed? Elena activated the chamber's main display screen, showing a star chart of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of confirmed Valdari artifacts, while orange dots showed sites where similar objects had been reported but not confirmed. The armor told me they won the war, but couldn't destroy the enemy completely. They pushed the Void Devourers back to the spaces between galaxies and set up an eternal watch to make sure they never returned. But the Valdari are dying out. Most of them have chosen oblivion rather than continue their vigil. Then we're safe, Dr. Vorth said, but his voice lacked conviction. Are we? When was the last time anyone detected signals from the Galactic Edge monitoring stations? When did the Deep Space Early Warning Systems last report normal readings? Elena brought up another display, this one showing communication logs from the galaxy's outermost regions. The pattern was disturbing. Over the past several years, stations had been going silent one by one. Not destroyed in dramatic explosions, just gone quiet. The monitoring networks that the major civilizations set up assume they're watching for conventional threats. Elena continued. Pirates, rogue asteroids, natural phenomena. They're not designed to detect entities that exist partially outside normal space. Dr. Vorth stared at the data for a long moment. This is speculation. Even if you're right about the Valdari, even if these Void Devourers are real, there's no proof they're actually returning. Elena was about to respond when every holographic display in the room suddenly flickered and changed. Instead of archaeological data, they now showed the same image, a view of deep space beyond the galactic rim, where stars were going out one by one. Both researchers turned toward the Valdari armor's containment chamber. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the artifact glowing brighter than ever before, its symbols shifting and rearranging themselves into new configurations. Elena felt the familiar voice speaking in her mind, but this time it carried an urgency that made her blood run cold. They come, the Valdari whispered. The first scouts probe the outer darkness. The great hunger stirs in the void between galaxies. Time grows short. Elena, Dr. Vorth said quietly, the armor is reacting to something. Elena was already moving toward the containment chamber. Not something, someone. The Valdari are sensing their ancient enemies. The Void Devourers are testing our defenses, looking for weak points. She stopped at the observation window, placing her hand against the reinforced glass. The armor's glow intensified in response, and Elena felt a flood of new information pouring into her mind. Star charts showing the enemy's approach routes, technical specifications for weapons that could hurt beings of living darkness, and most importantly, the locations of every remaining Valdari artifact in the galaxy. You must gather them, the voices urged. Find those who can bear the burden. The armor sleeps, but it remembers. When the darkness comes, you will need every guardian you can wake. Elena turned back to Dr. Vorth, who was staring at her with growing alarm. I need to contact the consortium leadership. Not the archaeological division, the military command structure. Elena, you're talking about starting a galactic war against enemies that might not even exist. I'm talking about preparing for a war that's already started. The Void Devourers are coming whether we believe in them or not. The question is whether we'll be ready when they arrive. Elena began typing commands into the database terminal, pulling up shipping manifests and storage facility inventories. I need access to every Valdari artifact we've ever discovered. The weapons, the armor, the tools, everything. The consortium will never approve that. Half of those artifacts are classified as too dangerous for study. Then I'll go around them. Elena's fingers flew over the control interface. There are private collectors, black market dealers, independent research facilities. Someone out there has pieces of Valdari equipment, and I'm going to find them all. Dr. Vorth watched her work with growing unease. And then what? You said these artifacts drive everyone except humans insane. What makes you think other humans will react the same way you did? Elena paused in her typing. That was a good question. One she'd been avoiding thinking about. Her reaction to the Valdari armor had been unique among the expedition team. But was it unique among humans? Or was there something about her species that made them naturally compatible with the ancient warrior's sacrifice? Test them, the Valdari voices suggested. Bring others to the armor. Let them choose whether to bear the burden. I need to bring other humans here, Elena said aloud. Military personnel, volunteers, anyone willing to try. If the Valdari are right about my species, we might be the only ones who can use their weapons effectively. And if you're wrong? If humans react the same way every other species has? Elena looked back at the glowing armor, feeling the weight of thousands of trapped souls pressing against her consciousness. They had chosen to sacrifice their lives, their deaths, even their afterlives to protect others. The least she could do was honor that choice. Then we find another way, she said simply. But we don't give up. Someone has to stand guard while the galaxy sleeps. If it can't be the Valdari anymore, maybe it can be us. In the containment chamber, the armor's glow pulsed once in what might have been approval. 2 weeks after Elena's first contact with the Valdari armor, the first human volunteers arrived at the research facility. They came from all walks of life, military veterans, emergency responders, doctors who worked in disaster zones, and ordinary people who had heard Elena's classified briefings and understood what was at stake. Captain Marcus Chen was the first to volunteer. A former Earth Defense Force officer who had lost his entire unit in a mining colony disaster. He understood the weight of survivors' guilt and the need to protect others. When Elena explained what the Valdari armor represented, he didn't hesitate. Show me, he said simply. Elena led him to the observation deck overlooking the containment chamber. The armor sat in its sterile white room, glowing with that familiar red light. Captain Chen studied it for several minutes, his scarred face thoughtful. It doesn't look like much, he said finally, but I can feel something from here. Like standing next to a memorial wall, all that grief and duty packed into one place. Are you sure you want to try this? Elena asked. We don't know if all humans will react the same way I did. You could end up like the alien researchers. Chen looked at her with steady brown eyes. Doc, I've been carrying ghosts for 10 years. 23 good people died because I made the wrong call. If there's a chance to make that mean something, to protect people the way I couldn't protect them, then I'm willing to take the risk. Elena activated the containment chamber's airlock system. Remember, just touch the chest plate with your bare hand. If you feel anything overwhelming, pull away immediately. Captain Chen suited up and entered the chamber. The moment he stepped through the inner airlock, the armor's glow intensified, just as it had when Elena first approached. The symbols began shifting and rearranging themselves, responding to his presence. Elena watched through the observation window as Chen walked slowly toward the artifact. His steps were steady, confident, the walk of a soldier approaching his duty. When he placed his palm against the armor's chest plate, the transformation was immediate and dramatic. The red glow vanished, replaced by brilliant white light that filled the entire chamber. But more than that, Elena could feel the Valdari's collective consciousness reaching out, recognizing something in Chen that resonated with their ancient purpose. Another guardian, the voices whispered in Elena's mind. One who understands the price of protection. Through the communication system, she could hear Chen's voice, thick with emotion. I can hear them. All of them. They're teaching me. Elena activated the chamber's recording systems as Chen's body language changed. His military bearing became something else, more fluid, more precise. Ancient combat techniques were being downloaded directly into his mind, along with tactical knowledge about enemies that existed beyond normal space. When Chen finally stepped back from the armor, his eyes glowed with the same white light as the Valdari symbols. But unlike the alien researchers, he wasn't screaming or breaking down. Instead, he looked more focused than Elena had ever seen him. I understand now. he said quietly. The things they fought, the Void Devourers, they're not just physically dangerous. They're entropy given form. They don't just destroy matter and energy. They unmake the very concepts that hold reality together. Can you handle the connection? Elena asked. Chen flexed his hands and Elena could see faint traceries of white light running along his veins. It's like carrying a torch that never goes out. Heavy but not unbearable. The Valdari. They're not insane, they're just tired. So incredibly tired. Over the following days, more human volunteers made contact with the armor. Not all of them were successful. About 1 in 4 experienced the same terror that had affected the aliens, though none suffered permanent damage. But the majority formed the same connection that Elena and Chen had achieved. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, a trauma surgeon from the outer colonies, emerged from the chamber with knowledge of Valdari medical techniques that could heal wounds that shouldn't be survivable. Lieutenant Tom Zhang, an engineer who had lost his family in a terrorist attack, gained understanding of defensive technologies that could protect entire star systems. With each successful contact, Elena felt the network of awakened Valdari artifacts growing stronger. The armor on Zerion Prime was no longer isolated. It was part of a vast communications web that stretched across the galaxy. And then, 3 weeks after the first human volunteers arrived, something unprecedented happened. Elena was reviewing tactical data in her quarters when alarms began blaring throughout the facility. She rushed to the command center to find Dr. Vorth staring at displays showing energy readings from across the galaxy. Elena, you need to see this, he said urgently. Every Valdari artifact we've ever cataloged just activated simultaneously. The holographic displays showed a 3-dimensional map of known space, with hundreds of points of light suddenly blazing to life. From the crystal sword of Vega Prime to the meditation gauntlets of Kepler 7, every piece of Valdari equipment was awakening after millions of years of dormancy. But more disturbing were the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. On 17 different worlds, humans were being drawn to museums, storage facilities, and private collections where Valdari artifacts were kept. They weren't going insane like other species. Instead, they were forming the same psychic connections that Elena's volunteers had experienced. It's spreading, Elena whispered. The armor isn't just teaching individual humans. It's awakening every piece of Valdari equipment in the galaxy and calling humans to bond with them. Captain, Chen appeared on the command center's main screen, connecting from Earth where he had gone to brief military leadership. Dr. Vasquez, we're getting reports from all over human space. People are showing up at archaeological sites, claiming they need to complete the circuit or join the watch. Most of them have never heard of the Valdari before today. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. How many? Thousands so far, maybe tens of thousands, and the number is growing every hour. On the holographic display, new points of light continued to appear as more artifacts awakened. But Elena noticed something else, a pattern in the activations. They weren't random. The artifacts were awakening in a specific sequence, creating a network that covered the galaxy's spiral arms like a vast defensive grid. The enemy comes, the Valdari voices whispered urgently in her mind. The first scouts have breached the outer barriers. We must prepare. Elena turned to Dr. Vorth, who was monitoring communications from the Galactic Rim. What are the deep space monitoring stations reporting? Vorth's ethereal form flickered with anxiety. That's just it, most of them aren't reporting anything. We've lost contact with 60% of the early warning network in the past week. Lost contact how? Equipment failure? Natural disasters? No, they just stopped transmitting. No distress signals, no emergency beacons. One moment they were sending routine status updates, the next moment there was only silence. Elena studied the pattern of lost stations on the galactic map. They formed a rough circle around one section of the rim, as if something was systematically eliminating the monitoring network from a specific direction. They're clearing a path, she realized. The Void Devourers are taking out our early warning system so they can approach undetected. Captain Chen's voice crackled through the communication system. Dr. Vasquez, I'm getting tactical data from the armor network. The Valdari are sharing battle plans, weapon specifications, defensive strategies. It's like they're preparing for war. Because they are, Elena said grimly. And so are we, whether we're ready or not. Elena activated the facility's general communication system, opening channels to every major government and military organization in human space. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenoarchaeologist with the Galactic Archaeological Consortium. I need to speak with your highest-ranking military commanders immediately. Dr. Vorth stared at her in alarm. Elena, what are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago, she replied. I'm telling humanity that we're about to become the galaxy's new guardians. Whether we chose it or not, on the displays around them, more Valdari artifacts continued awakening, and more humans answered their call. The ancient network of the galaxy's protectors was coming back to life, but this time it would be powered by human souls instead of Valdari ones. Elena just hoped her species was strong enough to bear the burden that had eventually broken their predecessors. The first Void Devourer scout emerged from dark space on a Tuesday. Elena was in the command center of the hastily constructed Valdari defense network when the Outer Rim monitoring stations detected something that shouldn't exist. The entity appeared as a distortion in spacetime itself, a wound in reality that consumed light and matter with equal hunger. Contact confirmed, reported Lieutenant Zhang from his position at the sensor array. 3 weeks of bonding with Valdari artifacts had changed him, giving his voice an otherworldly echo that came from sharing consciousness with ancient warriors. Single scout entity approximately 3 light-years beyond the Galactic Rim. It's testing our defenses. Elena felt the collective mind of the Valdari armor network surge with recognition and ancient fear. Across the galaxy, thousands of humans bonded to Valdari artifacts suddenly knew what they were looking at. The return of the enemies that had nearly destroyed all life millions of years ago. They probed for weakness. The Valdari voices whispered through the psychic link. The scout seeks gaps in our watch, pathways the Great Swarm might follow. Captain Chen materialized on the main holographic display, broadcasting from the defense platform orbiting Earth. His appearance had changed dramatically over the past month. The Valdari armor he now wore had fused partially with his body, creating organic-looking metal growths along his arms and chest. His eyes glowed with permanent white light. All human-bonded defenders are reporting the same thing, he said. The entity is sending out some kind of scanning pulse mapping our defensive positions. Elena nodded grimly. The transformation of humanity over the past 4 weeks had been both miraculous and terrifying. Over 50,000 humans had successfully bonded with Valdari artifacts, creating a defensive network that spanned the galaxy. But the price was becoming clear. Each bonding changed the human involved, making them something more and less than they had been before. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez appeared on another display, her medical bay now equipped with Valdari healing chambers that looked more grown than built. Elena, I'm getting reports from the bonded defenders. They're all experiencing the same visions. Massive swarms of void devourers gathering in the space between galaxies. The scout isn't alone. How long do we have? Elena asked. The answer came not from her human colleagues but from the Valdari themselves, their collective voice echoing through every bonded defender simultaneously. Days, perhaps hours. The great hunger grows impatient. Too long have they waited in the dark between stars. Elena turned to study the tactical display surrounding her. The galaxy's major alien civilizations had reacted to the news of returning void devourers with predictable panic. The Zephyrian Republic had retreated to their core worlds, surrounding them with defensive shields. The Crystalline Collective had gone into complete isolation, sealing their star systems behind impenetrable barriers. Even the mighty Rigelian Empire had pulled back, their fleets to protect only their most important colonies. Only humanity had stepped forward to man the outer defenses. Status report on the bonded defender network, Elena commanded. Lieutenant Zhang's fingers danced over controls that no human had designed, interfacing directly with Valdari technology through the neural link in his spine. 53,412 active defenders spread across 897 defensive positions. All Valdari artifacts are fully awakened and operating at maximum efficiency. Elena felt a stab of grief as she remembered the cost of each of those numbers. Every bonded defender had volunteered knowing they might never be fully human again. The Valdari artifacts didn't just grant power. They demanded a piece of their user's soul in return, binding them to an eternal duty that might outlast their physical bodies. Movement detected, Lieutenant Zhang announced suddenly. The scout is... Oh no. On the main display, the distortion that was the Void Devourer scout suddenly expanded, tearing a hole in space-time large enough for something massive to pass through. But instead of the swarm they'd been expecting, what emerged was far worse. It was a void devourer queen, a creature the size of a small moon that existed partially in normal space and partially in the spaces between dimensions. Where the scout had been a mere distortion, the queen was a living absence, a thing that unmade everything it touched, reducing matter and energy to primordial chaos. Impossible, the Valdari voices cried out in unison. The queens were all destroyed in the last war. We made certain of it. Elena felt the collective shock and fear of 50,000 bonded defenders as they realized they were facing something the Valdari themselves thought was extinct. But she also felt something else, a uniquely human response to impossible odds: determination. All defensive positions, this is command, Elena broadcast through the network. We are facing an enemy the Valdari thought they had eliminated. This is uncharted territory for all of us. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication array, steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. Orders, command? Elena looked around the command center at her transformed colleagues. Dr. Rodriguez with her glowing medical implants. Lieutenant Zhang with his neural interface that let him think at the speed of quantum computers. Dozens of other humans who had given up pieces of their humanity to become something the galaxy needed. We do what humans have always done when faced with the impossible, she said simply. We adapt. Zhang, I need tactical analysis on the Queen's capabilities. Rodriguez, prep the medical facilities for massive casualties. Chen, coordinate with all outer defense positions. When you? Chen asked. Elena looked down at her own hands, which had begun showing the telltale signs of Valdari bonding, thin lines of white light running beneath her skin. I'm going to ask the Valdari to teach us something they never taught anyone before. How to kill a queen. The psychic link exploded with activity as Elena opened her mind fully to the Valdari network. Information flooded her consciousness. Not just tactical data, but the actual memories of the ancient warriors who had faced these creatures before. She experienced their battles, their strategies, their final desperate gambit that had cost them their species but saved the galaxy. But she also felt something the Valdari had never expected: human innovation working alongside their ancient knowledge. Where the Valdari had seen only duty and sacrifice, humans saw opportunity and adaptation. There is a way, Elena realized, the thought echoing through the entire network. But it requires something the Valdari could never do. What? The ancient voices asked. It requires us to let go. Elena's insight spread through the network like wildfire. The Valdari had been trapped by their own success. Their binding to their artifacts had made them immortal guardians, but it had also made them rigid, unable to change or grow. Humans, with their shorter lifespans and chaotic creativity, could do something the Valdari never could. They could evolve the weapons themselves. Across the galaxy, bonded defenders began experimenting with their Valdari artifacts, pushing them beyond their original specifications. Captain Chen's armor sprouted new weapons systems that combined human engineering with Valdari energy, manipulation. Dr. Rodriguez's medical chambers began producing hybrid technologies that could heal wounds inflicted by beings of living entropy. Most dramatically, the defensive network itself began to change. Instead of static defensive positions, it became a living, adaptive system that could reshape itself to meet new threats. When the Void Devourer Queen finally reached the outer defenses, it faced something no enemy of the Valdari had ever encountered: a defense network that learned and adapted with each attack. The battle raged for 6 days, across 17 star systems. Elena lost count of how many bonded defenders died in those first hours, their human souls burning out as they pushed their Valdari artifacts past all safety limits. But for every defender that fell, the network grew stronger, incorporating their final insights into its collective knowledge. On the 7th day, Elena made the choice that would define humanity's future. Standing in the command center as reports of the Queen's advance continued to pour in, she felt the weight of every human soul connected to the Valdari network. They were losing, not because they lacked courage or power, but because the Queen was simply too vast, too alien, too fundamentally wrong for conventional weapons to affect. The old way has failed, Elena announced through the network. Time for the human way. She placed both hands on the primary Valdari armor that had started everything, feeling its consciousness merge completely with her own. But instead of accepting its ancient programming, she began rewriting it from the inside out. "What are you doing?" The Valdari voices cried out in alarm. "Something you never could," Elena replied. "I'm making a choice you were never brave enough to make." With her consciousness spread across the entire network, Elena began the most dangerous process imaginable. She started unbinding the Valdari souls from their artifacts, setting them free from the eternal duty that had trapped them for millions of years. But as each ancient warrior was finally allowed to rest, Elena bound her own consciousness deeper into the network. Not just her, but every human defender who volunteered to take the Valdari's place in the great machine that protected the galaxy. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.